like the world titles in either company did change hands quite often. They weren't afraid to do the rapid fire title changes. But yeah, Jeff Jarrett, he's a former, I think, 4-time WCW champion. Of course, he's been NWA champion as he went over to TNA, and he's been TNA champion and all that sort of stuff. It's funny because, like, broadly speaking, he's sort of considered to be sort of an undeserving, an overrated sort of guy. You know, he's sort of only ever gotten to where he's been at by being friends with the Booker. You know, his father Jerry was sort of on top and made sure that he had a steady job, and then he was only ever got somewhere in WCW because he was literally the chosen one. That was his gimmick in WCW, but he was literally the chosen one by his friend Vince Russo, and then by nature of being one of the owners of TNA Wrestling in its early days, he became one of their mainstay top stars, which makes sense, by the way. Like, you know that you're going to be sticking around. If you're a big enough name to hold the world title, you might as well be the one to hold the world title because you know that you're not going to go to the competitors. To me, and I'm going to use a baseball analogy, which is funny because, you know, I don't watch that much baseball at all. But to me, Jeff Jarrett has always been a guy who's been trying to play in the MLB, but at best he is he's doesn't belong in the MLB. But the thing is, he doesn't belong in the minors either. He's not a AAA player, but he's not a major league player either. He kind of belongs somewhere in between, and he never really quite was able to shake that label. I think that the worst thing in a way that ever happened to Jeff Jarrett, and this is kind of sad, but I think that it's Owen Hart's death. His Owen Hart's untimely death, because I've been watching some of the old 1999 WWF pay-per-views when Owen and Jeff Jarrett were tag team champions, and they work well together. They're sort of at an interesting little spot in the card. I think that Jeff Jarrett could have been a really talented and a really well sought after, a real good hand at tag wrestling, and maybe then branched off later in his career, kind of like JBL, actually, John Bradshaw Layfield. You know, for many years he was not that great as a singles guy, but then he teams up with Farouk, Ron Simmons, and they create the Acolytes, and then later the APA, and then, like, later on down the line, sort of towards the back half of his career, the back end of, you know, the final 10 years, or, might even be less than that. It might have been like the last 6 or 7 years. That's when he did his big push at the top of the card. And, like, honestly, in terms of his in-ring career, I think that you look at JBL and you look at Jeff Jarrett, and you kind of have similar types of guys, but in ring, you look at JBL more favorably. Now, as a person, I don't think JBL's that good of a guy, but that's besides the point. We're not really onto that. The allegations of him being a awful person and upholding sort of the worst parts of wrestling's carny past. We'll leave that aside for now. The thing about the WWE Hall of Fame, though, is Jeff Jarrett is going into a Hall of Fame that, yes, has the likes of Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair, and, Hulk racist Hogan. More on that later. But he's also going into a Hall of Fame that houses the Birdman. He's also going into a Hall of Fame that houses a lot of other sort of smaller, like Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who was really over in his day, but a lot of guys who sort of belong below Jeff Jarrett on the proverbial totem pole of professional wrestling, your hierarchy of professional wrestling. Obviously, a lot of people above him, your Macho Mans, your Ricky the Dragon Steamboats. But, you still got the likes below him that, I I don't have a problem with Jeff Jarrett going into the Hall of Fame. Now, if he was supposed to be the headline draw, like, if you didn't have somebody bigger, a bigger name going in, like Goldberg, like the Dudleys, like Ivory, yeah, then maybe it's a problem. But it's not as if they're shunting off bigger names in order to let Jeff into the Hall of Fame. Every year, there's somebody who goes in who isn't as big of a presence in the wrestling world. This year it's Jeff Jarrett, and you know what? Congratulations to the guy. I know he's been going through some personal stuff lately as well. I believe he went into rehab not too long ago, and did that successfully. Did a successful stint in rehab. I hope that he is well, sort of overall. And you know what? Honestly, good on him. Congratulations for going into the Hall of Fame. Okay. Let's talk about Hulk Hogan for a second, because people have been asking me about this, because he's in the news again. So how much of this do I have to really recap for you? Maybe all of it. I don't know. I'll give you a quick rundown. So Hulk Hogan was last seen in the WWE back in 2015. At that point in time, the WWE had terminated his contract, stating that they're committed to embracing and celebrating individuals from all backgrounds. Although Hogan said that he chose to resign. Basically, WWE removed basically all references to Hogan from pretty much all of their media, their website, including, like, he was a judge on a reality show that WWE was running at the time, Tough Enough. He was removed from a planned DLC in the video game that was being released at that point in time. And this was due to, like, some pretty racially awful things that Hogan said. The unconsensual release of a sex tape that Hogan was in, along with the then wife of his good friend Bubba the Love Sponge. So Mr. Love Sponge released this sex tape. It ended up in the hands of the National Enquirer and Gawker, and they released bits and pieces of it that I'm just living in happy ignorance of what that actually looked like. But because thank God I don't need to see the little Hulkster, you know what I'm saying? Anyhow, so Hogan ended up taking Gawker to court over this, and now there's no more Gawker, which I find kind of a bit chilling, but that's besides the point. So in the recordings, Hogan said some pretty awful racist things, where he was talking about his daughter Brooke dating a black man, and he repeatedly used the N-word, that one, and admitted in the tape to being, quote, a racist to a point. So anyhow, we'll get into my thoughts on that whole mess in just a second's time. The reason that I'm bringing this up at all is that, like I said earlier, we're in WrestleMania season. This is when there's the most attention on wrestling, and Hulk Hogan is making some noise. And he did an interview with ABC Action News, which is out of his native Tampa. And he's saying that there is a groundswell for the 65-year-old to return to the wrestling fold, to return to New York, as it were, to the WWE. The great thing about this article, I'm gonna link it in the show notes. Hulk-A-Mania isn't stepping into the political ring anytime soon. That is fucking chilling as a sentence. But anyhow, Hogan is saying that there are people out there who are pulling for a return. Quote, the fans are pulling for it, the wrestlers are pulling for it. We've got a really great rapport with everyone, and we're working towards it, changing the story and making things right again. with the WWE Universe. So, okay. Just to sort of have a thought on what Hogan has done. First of all, I think WWE's reaction to all of these accusations, or all these stories, rather, they're not really accusations, all these stories, I think was the right one at the time. The WWE has a pretty rocky relationship with race. If your color, the color of your skin is different than white, you've got a pretty difficult road to getting to the upper echelons of professional wrestling when it comes to the WWE. There has only really been one black WWE champion, and in that case, it's only, like, I don't want to get into he's only half black, but it's The Rock. We're not talking about. I'm not trying to say like The Rock isn't black enough for me or anything like that, but like we're not talking about somebody like Chadwick Boseman being WWE champion here. It's The Rock. It's a little bit different. So like basically when the WWE chose to make this decision, I think they made the right PR decision at the time. And like Hogan pretty much hasn't been back since, and it's like he's not completely persona non grata. It's not Chris Benoit, okay? It's not that level of this guy, he who shall not be named. We didn't have a second Lord Voldemort on our hands in the WWE. The other thing is that, like, I have a certain level of sympathy for Hogan. He was caught saying some things that were less than flattering, less than good character in a moment where he felt that he was completely private. It's difficult though. Like I understand, like there's been many times that I've had conversations with my girlfriend where we're by ourselves. It's just the two of us. We're just talking about things. Maybe we're working through something, because we do like to have, good substantial conversations. We try and work through things, and maybe sometimes I come at things with a less enlightened view. The issue is that I'm not ever saying anything outwardly hateful or outwardly racist, and I don't like to feel that I have that bone in my body. I'm sure that there are some things that deep down I've got some really ignorant views on things. I'm not going to sit here and lie about that. That having been said, like, I think that, I would never sit there and say, like, I'm a little bit racist, and I would never sit there and say, no matter how private I felt that it was, I would never use a word like the N-word in a hateful way, which Hogan clearly was. He was speaking out of hate. And that's problematic for me. Hogan has been out of the WWE fold for 3 years now. And now he's talking about how there's this big groundswell for him to come back. First of all, I don't think that there is. If there's ever a groundswell for Hogan to come back, it's never going to be Vince McMahon, reaching out his arms to Hogan out of the goodness of his heart. It's going to be because there's money to be made. But ultimately, it's not a good look for Hogan to say these things during Black History Month. He's saying that there's this big groundswell that it's all good. Time has gone by. Like, he hasn't rehabilitated his image at all, and he's doing absolutely no good towards doing that right now. I have no need to see. First of all, even if we set aside the racial element of things, like, I have no need to see 65-year-old Hulk Hogan on WWE TV anymore. The man can't wrestle anymore because of all the injuries that he's had over the years. He's had some very serious back issues because of the leg drop that he's done for years. So I don't need to see Hogan on like an artistic point of view anyhow. And then there's the whole race issue. I do enjoy. So Mark Henry, who is a former U.S. Olympian, formerly the world's strongest man,